Canadian Premier Doug Ford, and a Canadian Premier is like a governor of a state in America, squandered $75 million on an ad that he aired on American television as relates to the tariff war, and now he's on Jake Tapper's CNN doing a tour of shame.
This guy is an absolute buffoon.
Viva Fry, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler, in my home office, and this news broke when I was in Switzerland and I had to do a vlog on a beautiful river that flowed into Lake Lugano covering the issue. Here's a bit of a segment from that vlog.
Now, if you think I'm exaggerating or that I must have made a mistake, I thought so as well. I had to go to CTV News. This is what CTV News describes as the cost of that ad, and I'm reading from CTV News. The government of Ontario launched earlier this month a television ad which is said to have cost 75 million Canadian dollars, about $54 million US, and is expected to run through January on networks including Newsmax, Fox, and NBC. The ad quotes from Reagan's April 25th, 1987, quote, radio address to the nation on free and fair trade.
This all started with a political ad that Doug Ford, he's the premier of the province of Ontario, paid $75 million for, ran on American television stations for some reason, as though that could not arguably be deemed to be interfering with American politics, squandered dollars to run a political ad in America, and now he had to do something of a tour of shame because after that ad aired, Donald Trump severed all negotiations with Canada as relates to the tariff war. Now, the only problem with that ad is that it took statements made by President Ronald Reagan totally out of context. I should say not totally out of context, just essentially out of context, where they aired these statements that Ronald Reagan made, ostensibly condemning tariffs and promoting total open borders, except they cut out the 55 seconds of that very video in which he begged to retain the right to impose tariffs, selective as he might think they are. He begged for the right to retain tariffs as a negotiating tool. They just clipped that part out of the video because, you know, they have to lie when telling the truth.
Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. In certain select cases, like the Japanese semiconductors, we've taken steps to stop unfair practices against American products, but we've still maintained our basic long-term commitment to free trade and economic growth. So, with my meeting with Prime Minister Nakasone and the Venice Economic Summit coming up, it's terribly important not to restrict a president's options in such trade dealings with foreign governments. Unfortunately, some in the Congress are trying to do exactly that. I'll keep you informed on this dangerous legislation because it's just another form of protectionism, and I may need your help to stop it. Remember, America's jobs and growth are at stake. Until next week, thanks for listening, and God bless you.
Now, this is one of those situations where I would argue they deliberately misrepresented what Ronald Reagan said, but even if he had said what they said, he said what Ronald Reagan said is damn near 40 years old. We live in a different world right now, and what Ronald Reagan said 40 years ago might not be 100% applicable today. But bottom line, they took what Ronald Reagan said wildly out of context, deliberately clipped the last 55 seconds in which he begged for the right to impose tariffs as the case may be, and they know that they did it, but they say, well, it was essentially true. That's why we had to cut out the part that basically contradicted what we said was true. Well, ever since Trump cut off all trade talks with Canada, I think some Canadians might have gotten a little mad at Dougie Ford, and he's now doing something of a tour of shame, and his first stop is Jake Tapper's CNN. In a tweet from, I think, give or take March, I'll double check the date, Viva Fry at the Viva Fry, the reasons given, whether you choose to believe them or not, had to do with 1, unacceptable numbers of people on terror watch lists attempting to cross into the US from Canada due to Canada's terrible immigration policies, and 2, Canada's horrendous drug problem in Canada and its impact on the states. Some may think these excuses were pretextual, in which case all the Canadian government had to do was respond to these concerns in order to eliminate the, quote, pretext, end quote, for a tariff war. Instead, Canada chose to wage a tariff war that will hurt Canadians exponentially more than anyone in the US. But that's what communist regimes do, make their citizens suffer so they can find a boogeyman to blame it on. Respectfully submitted, and I was replying to @Rod D. Reher. Oh yeah, now I remember. It was in response to a tweet from Rod Dreher at Rod Dreher. Could someone please explain to me why Trump is pursuing this trade war, especially with Canada, one of our closest allies? Please be serious. I really want to know. It makes no sense to me. And just to throw one other tweet out there, truth over feelings, irony, do you comprehend what imposing 25% duties will do to the Canadian economy? Obviously you don't or don't care. I am pro-Trump, but this is outrageous. This is like nuking us. To which I replied, Viva Fry, at the Viva Fry, I could have sworn Trump's proposal was, quote, fix up your border or we impose a tariff, end quote. Well, Canada didn't fix up its border. Canada didn't take care of that darn immigration problem that is leading to people on terror watch lists crossing the border into the U.S. at exponentially higher rates than from the border with Mexico. But Doug Ford screwed everything up, and now he's out doing a mea culpa tour. First stop, Jake the Fake Tapper on Communist News Network, CNN.
And we're back with more in our world lead. While President Trump makes progress on trade in Asia, he is currently icing out America's neighbor to the north, announcing an additional 10% tariff on Canada, apparently irked by a TV ad paid for by the Canadian province of Ontario, an ad that ran on U.S. TV networks, an ad that used parts of an anti-tariff speech by former President Ronald Reagan in 1987.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
That TV ad ran over the weekend, including during the World Series. And joining us now is the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. So you said this morning that this was, quote, the most successful ad in the history of North America. Is the additional 10% tariff on Canadians also part of that success?
Well, first of all, Jake, thanks for having me on. I start off every interviewing saying that Canadians love Americans. I love America. I love Americans. I lived there for 20 years. And that my intention was to bring this to the American people and tell them that tariffs, protectionism, does not work. Ronald Reagan was a free trader, the greatest president, in my opinion, ever. And we wanted to get the message out.
Tariffs, protectionism does not work, except in industries where they want protectionism, such like dairy, meat coming out of Canada, where they have imposed tariffs for years. Yeah, it doesn't work where you don't want it to work, and it works where you want it to work, and tariffs are good when you impose them, but they're bad when America imposes them. And by the way, why the heck is he airing this anti-tariff ad in America during the World Series? This is actual political interference coming by way of an idiot from Ontario. And then we get into the impressions, because Doug Ford, all he cares about is impressions on social media. Well, he got the impressions they wanted, except that each impression cost about $1.
And yeah, did the message get out? 100%. It had 11.4 billion with a B impressions. We talk in the media, but views around the world. And again, we just want to make sure that we work side by side with our closest friends and allies. A tariff on Canada is a tax on Americans.
11.4 billion impressions, and Doug Ford is proud about that. You know what else would get about 11.4 billion impressions? Doug Ford streaking at the World Series. Go ahead and do it, Doug. You like those impressions. And the cost of those impressions, probably about $11.4 billion on Canada.
CNN's news gathering partner, CBC, reports that your anti-Trump rhetoric, your criticism of Trump, came up repeatedly during trade negotiations. Was that intentional at all, being the bad cop?
Well, you know, I've never said anything personal about President Trump. In our ad, it was very ironic that President Trump saw it and he said, yeah, that was a good ad. If I was Canada, I'd run the same ad. And then all of a sudden he wakes up in the morning, someone whispers something in his ear, and now he's not happy. But it was an ad to inform the people in the U.S. and mission accomplished.
Canada's unemployment rate, as I'm sure I don't need to tell you, is now at its highest point in 9 years. Do you have any regrets about stirring the pot, possibly making things harder on your fellow Canadians due to this retaliation from President Trump?
No, I don't believe so. The person that started this whole thing around the world, not just with Canada, is President Trump. And the American people are finally feeling the effects of tariffs. And it's going to continue. The more tariffs, it's more of a tax on Americans and less jobs for America.
You want to fix up relations, get back on track, you want a deal, you should have accepted the terms when Trump said, fix up your border, enough with the fentanyl, we don't want terrorists crossing over from your country, fix it up and we'll have normal trade relations. But no, you had to double down like a bunch of idiots, including Pierre Poilievre from the Conservative Party. Anyhow, I'll play another clip just so you can bask in Doug Ford groveling in his own stupidity. But before I do that, make sure that you are liked, shared, subscribed, turn on notifications, drop a comment in the comment section because it feeds the algorithm. If you like what I do, share this with someone who you think would like it, but share it with someone who you know I would irritate. Now, because being a lawyer requires you, whether you like it or not, to steelman the argument of your adversary, I appreciate the steelman arguments out there. What Trump is imposing is not targeted tariffs to punish unfair business practices. It's blanket tariffs to punish a country. Well, we are arguing a bit of semantics right now where you say, yes, he has the right to impose some tariffs, but not total tariffs. He has the right to impose tariffs or he does not. Whether or not you like the fact that he's imposing massive amounts of tariffs to punish stupidity, stubbornness, and dangerous borders, that's a matter of opinion. But to the extent you implicitly, if not specifically, acknowledge Trump has the right to impose some tariffs, the only question right now is, did he impose too many? We'll see how it plays out in the courts. But a Canadian premier paying $75 million to air political ads in America, that is nothing shy of foreign interference in domestic politics. And it's so bad that even the 3 passport-carrying globalist whore that is Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, had to spank Doug Ford into submission. Listen to this.
After you spoke with your Prime Minister, Mark Carney, you paused the campaign, effective today, so the trade talks could resume. Did Carney demand that you do that?
No, he doesn't demand anything of me. I have a job to protect the largest economy in Canada, the engine of Canada, 16.5 million people, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm protecting the steel jobs, the auto jobs, the life science jobs, the manufacturing jobs. That's my duty as the Premier of Ontario.
So that is the latest. If you like what I do, you know what to do, yada, yada, yada. But most importantly, exercise, eat healthy, sunlight, talk to people in real life, and now you know your vlog. Peace out, peeps. Booyah!